So to begin, I'd like to acknowledge the Aboriginal people who are the traditional custodians of this land. I would also like to acknowledge the elders, both past and present. So thanks everybody for coming. It's really fantastic to see you all here, and in spite of everything, we're able to run the event this year, which is a big thing, and thanks so much for supporting the event. It's great to see so many old people here, old faces and new paradigm shifters thriving during the pandemic. Usually I try to keep things nice and light and be nice in my intro and welcome, try to channel some Libran vibes, but this year I think that my Sagittarian big mouth is going to get the better of me. So for those of you that I'm meeting for the first time, my name's Anthony O'Flynn. I'm the MC and the host for Paradigm Shift Summit, so I look forward to getting a chance to meet you this weekend when I'm not having minor heart attacks in between running the event and everything that I have to look after. But this is the first time we're having Paradigm Shift Summit so late. We usually have it in the winter or very early spring, and it's much warmer. Even noticed that I got a little bit sunburnt on the beach earlier this week. Pretty sure it was COVID related. But it's been a big year, isn't it? But it's really, I feel really supported knowing that we're all in this together. Scotty from marketing on $549,000 a year, and me on JobKeeper. So I'd like to welcome you all to Surfers Paradise. Obviously you're feeling the call. It's a spiritual heartbeat of Australia. We all know that. You really get to see some characters getting around the place, don't you? So 2020 has been quite a big year. At one point at Easter, it looked like it was just going to be a Peter Dutton of a year. But turned out to be a real Daniel Andrews of a year, didn't it? A real Daniel Andrews of a year. Somehow don't think the name Daniel will be too popular at christenings for the next 10, 20, 100 years in Melbourne and Greater Victoria. Haven't met too many Germans called Adolf. Just saying. Anastasia is probably not your first choice anyway, right? Or Gladys for that matter. So, you probably heard there's been a big election in America. Big election, right? There were some postal votes that arrived in Pennsylvania. They were actually dated earlier than when they were sent. Apparently the FBI is investigating Marty McFly for voter fraud. It's Back to the Future. Take your time with that one. It's a little metaphysical. Did you hear that Joe Biden raised more people from the dead than Jesus? True story. Apparently Jesus had a meltdown and blocked Joe on Facebook. No, but Jesus is cool. He's a cool guy. It's just that his friends are a little creepy. So speaking about Facebook, if Mark from California happens to be watching, then chill out, bro. They're just jokes, okay? They're just jokes. We're just putting the comedy back in communism. But jokes aside, I really have a high standard for this event, and I really try to make it the best I can for everybody. And it's really my aim to make this one of the best events celebrating the Great Awakening on the Gold Coast, anywhere on the Gold Coast this weekend. So really I really wanted to start with an energetic update and take you through where we're at and where I see us going. So, as I said, my name is Anthony O'Flynn, and we'll talk a little bit now about where I see us going and some of the challenges that we're facing individually and collectively, and I'll offer you an energetic update on what's happening. So this is basically a combination of rational, coherent, non-COVID logic syndrome and intuition, and we'll talk a little bit about what I see coming up ahead, on the road ahead. So obviously we're living through a complete monumental period in history.
Whereas if you see this is different.
Irreversible. And I know people are wanting everything to go back to the way things were before 2020, but that's not going to happen. The place that we're going to now will be far greater. It's basically a journey of awakening for us individually and collectively, and this really is the great awakening, the greatest show on earth. And we are actually living it day to day, moment to moment in real time. So it's a very exciting time to be alive. We just need to have the vision and the eyes to experience that. If you look at all the different traditions, all the different prophecies, indigenous cultures, mystics, seers, visionaries, various traditions, they all talk about a time of great tribulation, a time of intense suffering, and also a time of destabilization. And this has really shown up in the Hopi tradition. You can see that we're the ones we've been waiting for, and this is probably the most prophetic statement in this whole presentation, because what I see occurring a lot at the moment in the awakening community is a deferring of personal responsibility and an attempt for this external saviour myth, which I'll come to. And this idea that there's some external being, UFO, ET, ascended master, politician, billionaire, philanthropic type person that's going to save us. And that's actually not. The awakening is within, and that's exactly what we've come to experience and connect with. And then, of course, the great American mystic Edgar Cayce also talked about this eternal battle of good versus evil. And we're really in the middle of that now, and I don't think anyone in this room really needs any further evidence to understand that this really has gone to an accelerated phase now, which we will not return back from. In fact, I only anticipate that this acceleration will intensify. So in regard to the Great Awakening, basically we're at the third stage. And this is the epic battle of good versus evil. And some people really even suggest that perhaps this is the reason why Star Wars is such burned into popular culture from generation to generation, is because at the subconscious level that we have this really deep understanding of good versus evil. And we're living now through a time where this is coming to the forefront of our consciousness in our daily life, and we're seeing it day by day. Not only because Star Wars also embodies the hero's journey, the mythology of this idea of internal and impersonal awakening to become your own personal hero, which is really the message of Paradigm Shift Summit, and to really awaken that inner force that we all have within. So this is a spiritual war that we're dealing with. It really is good versus evil. You may not think in the New Age community, some people watching this may not think that there's such a thing as a war. I don't like to use that word, but maybe you're not at war with other people. It's not a good way to be, obviously, but there's a lot of institutions, organisations, transpersonal organisations that are definitely at war with you at a physical level, a health level, at war with your civil liberties, your freedoms, your rights, your economic prosperity, your health, your personal choices. There is definitely a war being waged on you, even if you are not aware of it. And this will become more and more evident as we move through this decade. So really, it's time for us to grow up and not live in this little bit of this unicorn saviour syndrome that everything is going to be okay if we just do nothing and hold on to our crystal and draw another card from our divinization deck. It's time for us to start. It's time for us to start to be heard, to find our voice, and to speak out against what we know to be right and what we know to be wrong. And this can't be delayed or put off or avoided any longer, because we really are now in the middle of this great awakening, and this really is a true spiritual war. Now, many people are in the New Age community, I've seen, are starting to mature and embrace things such as shadow work, things such as embracing the darkness and the inner limitations, impurities, these sorts of things. But remember that the darkness is not the opposite of light, it's just the absence of it. And the way to remove this darkness is to shine the light on the darkness, because we all know that then the darkness is removed. And so it's not pleasant, it's not enjoyable, it's not fun. But if we keep turning a blind eye to all the injustice, the corruption, the evil in the world, then we're not actually going to be able to solve it. And we really need to start to consider at a deeper level what our individual role is to help return to a place of justice, of fairness, of true equality, instead of just, if it doesn't affect us, just bury our head in the sand. Because this is actually an attempt to avoid evolution. And one of the main chapters I'm writing a book on this topic at the moment, is the start of the chapter basically is evolution is coming for you. And I mean that it's coming for me as well. And we're in an accelerated phase of evolution now, and it means that we really are needing to tidy up our own consciousness, and also that will be reflected back into the collective consciousness. And it's important with what's happening is we see this in a bigger perspective with what we perceive to be the evil in the world. And by that I'm talking about individuals. It's really easy to blame politicians, to blame bankers, to blame corporations, to blame all these kind of individuals as being wrong in the world. But what's important to understand at a deeper level is these are karmic agents, what we call karmic agents. And it means that they have a really important function because they're there to actually increase the light on this planet. And they have a deliberate purpose. And these completely demonic souls that do all this completely nefarious behaviour, twisted, that actually hate humanity, they're actually there to trigger the awakening. Because without them doing these completely despicable deeds, we wouldn't be in a place where today, where we've been seeing such a big awakening in 2020. And really, that's why. So everything that's occurring now is actually a catalyst for moving into the light. And if we see it like this, then we don't actually project our own anger, our own frustration, our own hate onto someone else. We can see that they're actually playing an important role. And when we see it from this more vast perspective, we understand that those people with their actions are actually helping support the awakening indirectly. And we may not always see that, but if you compare where we were a year ago to where we are now, the kind of conversations that you're having, the mass awakening that's occurring on this planet is absolutely phenomenal. I've been studying this for over 20 years. Some of the topics that I see now being spoken about widely, that there is this basic satanic agenda on this planet that's now being talked about regularly by more and more people. 20 years ago, that was like kind of, you weren't allowed to say anything about that, you get laughed at and so on. Now people are seeing it more clearly because it's really in your face, it's not something you can avoid anymore. But the key lesson for us is to learn to work with the enemy within, to learn to work with our own way of being, because if we're just projecting our own anger onto a convenient external figure like a politician or some other person, then it's actually a sign that we need to heal what's going on inside. Now, I'm not saying that's easy. I'm not saying that I've been so successful at doing that this year. I go on rants at home, just like pretty much all of you, right? But to become more conscious of that, that's the way forward for us. Because these karmic agents, they're there for a purpose, and they're there to actually trigger the complete planetary awakening. And what's happened in 2020 is that basically why things are getting so crazy is because the light is destabilizing the dark. Now people are saying, oh, there's so much darkness in the world, there's all these, global agendas, this global socialist agenda to, enslave us and all the rest of it. But that's been going on for like 30, 40 years, hundreds of years actually in some ways. Maybe thousands of years if you want to be technical about it. If you want to go back to the various organisations even in the Middle Ages and even earlier. But what's happening now is because the light is flooding the planet at a subtle level, that the light is what's causing all this to come to the surface. It's not that the dark is actually intensifying any more than what it's ever been before. In fact, it's diminishing, but now it's more apparent. So the events that are occurring now in this window from 2020 to 2040, you'll see that it's actually the light that's causing a lot of the chaos because the light is destabilising the dark. So I'm not saying that we should be welcoming what's going on, the ills in the world and so on, but understand it's like a fast track through this collective, this planetary shift. Now I put this same screen in my presentation last year, the intro I did last year, the window 2020 to 2040, because in my view this is basically, this 20 years is the pinnacle of these events unfolding. It could be 2020 to 2050, but things are going to get much, much, much better. In the short term, things are obviously going to get much worse. But believe me when I say the subtle reality on this planet is changing for the better in a way that is completely profound. There is now a much easier access to the very high vibrational energies that we can all connect with spontaneously. Much easier than what it's ever been before. Ever before in the 20-something years I've been doing yoga meditation. It's happening at a much, much faster, deeper, rapid, more profound level. And it is actually happening for real. Now, many people are talking about this cosmic event. It's sometimes called the solar flash, all these types of phrases. Well, we're living through that now moment to moment. We really are. This 26,000 year cycle that's ending, we're moving from this Kali Yuga in the Vedic understanding, the Hindu understanding, to Satya Yuga, the age of truth, which is the golden age of man. In 26,000 years, 20 years is just a blip on the radar on that time frame. So basically, the event is happening right now. We're living through it right now. So it's important that we create this spiritual momentum, this resilience and this ability to keep on moving forward with our own spiritual practice, our own way of being of service, contributing and evolving in whatever way we feel called to, because this is the event. So don't sit around waiting for some magical flash from the sun or from a space beam or an astral cloud or something like that. It is actually happening now in increments. But the astral body, the energetic body, the nadis as we call them in yoga, they can only handle a certain amount of energy at a certain amount of time. It'd be like putting 3,000 watts through a 60 watt bulb if you would just take someone who was like perhaps not living in such awesome ways and then make them like a living Buddha. They would not be able to handle the energetic change in their energetic frequency of the body itself, because these energetic bodies, they're real. They're just a different structure of matter. So we're living through this event now. And this is why the convergence is occurring. And the convergence is what I call the converging of the light and the dark. So it's converging, everything's happening at once. The light is becoming actually more amplified, but so is the dark. And for this reason, things are becoming more stratified, more separate. So in this 3D reality, we have this idea that everything is kind of merged or melted into one sort of plane of consciousness. But in the 5D reality, it's all stratified, it's all separate. So if you go into the 5th dimension and live there permanently, then you will be perhaps living side by side with the chaos of the 3rd dimension, but it won't affect you personally in the same way. Now, this is something that we played out and we'll see more how it will occur, but the point is to focus your attention on what is good, what is pure, what is right, and amplify your attention there. And again, I'm not saying that's easy. I'm not sure what happened to my April and May this year. I know I spent way too much time on the internet this year and way too much time on social media. And but this is the whole thing, is that we're watching this unfold in real time. And I've never seen this year so many people get red-pilled. It's absolutely incredible. I'm seeing people all over the world, and even especially here in Australia, because it's happening here, so I'm obviously more interested in what's occurring, that there's so many people that are just, the light has just got switched on. And what I'm seeing is that there is now a merging or a melting of the New Age and what I call the Truther movement into a more broad genre of the awakening community. And it's fascinating to see, because the Truthers are starting to get more aware of things like mindfulness, meditation, diet, lifestyle things, consciousness. And the New Age movement is starting to get more aware of politics. And I have a saying that if you're not interested in politics, you will be. Because where we're going in this decade, you will not be able to avoid it. This is going to be like the 60s, really, all over. And that's the only decade I can compare it to. It's going to become at the forefront of our attention, because we're really going to start getting engaged in the political process. It's already started to happen. This Cops for COVID thing that happened in New South Wales, led by Senior Constable Alexander Cooney, he sent an open letter asking the Commissioner to challenge the directions they are being given. How many of you heard about that? Yeah. And in this document, they talked about global communism, they talked about vaccines and everything. And this is a huge domino, because once the police start challenging the status quo, then it opens up the doorway for a lot more change. A lot more change. And this is a really big thing. And when people get involved in the institutions that really question the status quo, we can see that the shift will start to occur. And did you know that in Melbourne, or in Victoria, fewer than 900 of over 19,000 fines given to people for breaching Victoria's coronavirus lockdown rules have been paid? That's about 5%. 5%. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes. Even just this week, Senator Pauline Hanson, she actually launched a motion in the Senate to Australian government not to attend the World Economic Forum events based on the global reset. So these things are going more and more mainstream now. It's not some fringe thing. It's strange, isn't it? We could only have 125 people in this room because of the COVID regulations, but at Suncorp Stadium last month there was over 37,000 people. Somehow at Suncorp Stadium it's like doesn't have the COVID thing. It's what I call COVID logic syndrome. And American election. Let's get this out of the way. Did Donald Trump win the American election? Yes. Joe Biden?
No. Loser.
I'm getting heckled. Joe Biden, we have put together, I think, the most extensive and inclusive voter fraud organisation in the history of American politics. Apparently that was an answer to a longer question and was taken out of context, but was it? Do your own research. Joseph Stalin, it's not who votes that counts, it's who counts the votes. And for some reason people just haven't studied history and don't understand anything about socialism. In the Russian Revolution there were literally millions and millions, some reports up to 5 million people actually died of starvation. You never hear stories about people escaping to socialist countries. In Russia, the gulags, the death camps, the roads to the gulags were paved with bones of the people that have been executed. Like it was a complete shock horror story that you can say never be repeated. But this is a really important statement from a known dictator. And we're always looking to America, but we should perhaps look a little bit closer to home to see what's going on in Australia. Now that statement on the screen is from Fiona Simpson. Fiona Simpson is the member for Maroochydore in the Queensland Parliament. She's a member of the LNP. She's been a member since the 90s. And she says, on 15 July during question time in Parliament, I asked the Premier how a foreign-owned software company using Chinese-based coders was given the contract for Queensland's elections over every Queensland-based coding firm. The Premier said data is kept in Australia and denied any electoral roll data was accessed from overseas. However, she couldn't answer to why a foreign-owned company was allowed to undertake this software development using Chinese-based coders. And how many people know about that, even know about that? Yeah, I only just found out about it recently, and yet we all know what's going on in the US, so we should pay a little bit more attention to what's happening in Australia. I don't have the answers to any of those questions, but that's from Fiona Simpson, who's a Member of Parliament. So, moving on. Paradigm shift. We all know what a paradigm shift is, and we think when we go through this awakening that we're done. We know what's what. We know about the global power structure. We know how things operate, and we get to tell everybody else what to do, right? We get to tell everybody else that they're asleep, they don't know what's going on, to wake up and all this sort of thing. But do we really? Are we immune to being fooled? Are we immune to disinfo? Are we immune to psyops? Are we immune to misinformation? Logically, we have to say we're not. And this is important to understand because what I'm seeing in a certain movement is a kind of fanaticism that is a little bit unsettling. And the fanaticism is based on the support for Donald Trump. So in 2016 in the presidential debate, Hillary Clinton said, it's just awfully good that someone with the temperament of Donald Trump is not in charge of the law in our country. And then Donald Trump made that famous mic drop statement, because you'd be in jail.
Yeah, it's true.
But guess what? At Donald Trump's congressional luncheon, Donnie says the following, I was very honoured, very, very honoured when I heard that President Bill Clinton and Secretary Hillary Clinton was coming today, and I think it's appropriate to say, and I'd like you to stand up, I have a lot of respect for those two people. And what does that mean for the whole QAnon phenomenon? Any election now, Donnie's coming to save the world. Any election, right? Is it a psyop? Isn't it a psyop? Anyone that thinks that they know the answer to that question cannot logically be correct. It's just an opinion. Okay, some people would actually know somewhere the truth behind it, logically. But do we know? Can we say? We can't. And that's why we always have to keep an open mind that we could be incorrect about the opinions, the viewpoints, the assessments we're making of information. Now, obviously, I don't know what the truth about the QAnon phenomenon is. We do have to have the possibility that it is a very sophisticated psyop. because we're still waiting to see what happens. And if Donald Trump does lose this election, which, let's face it, it's probable, I don't know how probable, the betting closed at Donald Trump was paying $8.50 while the votes were still being counted at one point. So we don't know what's going to happen, but my point is that we should always keep an open mind that we could be wrong, or we could even be right about certain information, certain opinions that we're holding, and that it's okay to be wrong. Because I can't say in my 20-year journey into all this that I've always got everyone assessed correctly and all this sort of thing. Of course not. It's impossible. And this really feeds into the external saviour myth that I mentioned earlier. And that's, for me, one of the key issues with the whole QAnon issue is that we're waiting on Donald Trump to save the world. Now, it's more complex than that, because we actually understand that a lot of the information and what's occurring in the QAnon phenomenon is actually occurring in a sense that action's already been taken, which makes it even more confusing for people trying to find their way through, navigate the maze of this information. So the things like the human trafficking and these sorts of things, there is action being taken. And this makes it look more like someone's planning this disinformation, so the masses simply reject everything to do with the QAnon phenomenon. And that's the point, is that maybe it's been done deliberately, so all the good things that have been done behind the scenes with Donald Trump, and there are many of them that, of course, the mainstream media doesn't recognise, and then we, or the masses, or the mainstream people that don't believe in any of this, reject everything. And that would be a very sophisticated psyop. And also, on top of that, is the idea that someone's coming to save us and we don't need to take any action ourselves. Whether it's the ETs, or the unicorns, or Donald Trump. And it's the external saviour myth. And we need to understand at a personal level that our awakening, it's a rite of passage. It's not something we can avoid or forget about or not take into account. We have to do the work ourselves. But if we attach our opinions and our viewpoints to truth, then it's much simpler. And it means that our ego isn't so involved. Because when I'm challenging some of your opinions here, the ego comes out, the pride comes out, doesn't it? Oh, I'm right, Anthony, you haven't read the Q drops and all the rest of it. But if we're attached to being right, it doesn't matter whether it's QAnon or our political party is right. It means there's an intensification of our relationship with our ego, which is actually hindering us from evolving. And that's important to understand, because self-righteousness is one of the big qualities of someone with an intense, contracted relationship with their ego. So when we're more neutral and we're open to being wrong, then truth is the compass. And then we don't have to worry about being guided by our ego and, oh my God, it's so embarrassing, I have to go and delete all those posts on FaceB, I was wrong, because we don't care. So one of the biggest programs of indoctrination, of mind control that exist on this planet is the disempowerment of the human soul. And I can't stress this enough, that so many of us feel disempowered, and it's this victim mentality, and it's got to end if we're going to transform this planet, because we've got to move away from a state of being a victim. Like, look what they're doing, look what they're spraying from the sky, they're trying to inject us with this poison, it's going to change our DNA, they're trying to do all these things, and it's always this subconscious conditioning that we're the victim. And we need to move into a state of being empowered, that we're co-creating our own life, co-creating this reality that we're experiencing. And it means changing the frequency of where we're living. So this famous statement by Leonardo da Vinci, it's a pretty confronting thing to wake up, right? It's not an easy process. But be thankful you're going through it now and you're way ahead of the curve, because what's coming for the rest of this decade from this point on is not going to be easy for anybody. And then, of course, the mantra of the awakening community, wake up. So you see a lot telling people to wake up. How helpful is that, to tell someone to wake up? Has anyone ever had any success ever in this room? Oh, I told this person to wake up. And you know what? They did. No one. It's kind of awkward in here now. Why is that? Because no one likes to be told they're asleep. They don't even know what that is. A sleeping person doesn't actually know they're asleep. Why? Because they're not conscious. But here's a little tip, paradigm shifters. If you ask them a question, the way the brain works is the brain will try to formulate an answer to a question. the neural pathways will fire in a way to give an answer to a question. So telling people statements like, you need to wake up, you need to do the research, you need to get on YouTube and spend your life there and then you'll know what's going on, right? That's not going to work. But if you say, hey, you know that, remember the thing 9/11, you heard about that, right? You remember that? Yeah. What happened there? How many planes was it that hit the building? Oh, it was 2. And let's face it, some people even question that, right? You know what I'm talking about. And you say, well, how many towers actually collapsed from those 2 planes? Well, there was 2. And it's like, oh, actually no, there was actually 3 towers that collapsed from those 2 planes. So how did that 3rd tower collapse? Well, I'm not sure. I'll have to get back to you on that one. And they text you a week later, oh, office fires. Oh. So the way to sort of break this hypnosis is to ask questions. And it's patronising to tell people that they don't know what they're getting their information from. No one likes to be told that, right? Some of you got a little bit triggered there. Give me the death stare when I started raining on QAnon parade, right? But that's okay. We're all friends. We can move on from that. Well, at least for some of you. So, important to understand that when you're in a state of fear, and much of the collective is in a state of ongoing fear, they're not afraid of like a snake or something like this momentarily. It's an ongoing state of fear. The brain narrows and the reptilian brain is activated. It can't process new information. It can't absorb new information. And that's the whole trick that the elite keep humanity in, is a perpetual state of ongoing fear. And that's really because of the mainstream media. Now, we get a lot of academics in the mainstream media this year, a lot of people who sound intelligent, sound important, and they don't listen to you because what would you know what you're talking about? Well, I have an honours degree in politics, I have a master's degree in communications with a distinction average, and the mainstream media is nothing more than propaganda for the elite, for the global socialist agenda, for transnational organisations, for corporate interests, for moving towards a totalitarian, tyrannical society. That's what it is. Even Operation Mockingbird was an operation by the CIA going back to the Cold War, where they inserted their viewpoints and opinions through the media. Fully documented. Look into it. But now, the mainstream media have gone too far in 2020. They have lost all credibility. They are basically nail after nail in the coffin. So much fake news, so much bias, so much censorship, so much basic denial of any form of professional journalism occurring in those publications, both printed, digital, TV, that now people are turning away from the mainstream media more and more than ever and looking to other sources for truth, for real information, for objectivity. And the mainstream media is one of the main targets that people are being mind controlled, indoctrinated on this planet with through repetition, day after day, broadcast after broadcast. Basic social engineering 101 is occurring through the mainstream media, where beliefs are simply inserted into people's opinions. And we've seen censorship like never before. So why is it at a metaphysical level people cannot wake up? Now, I have to go through this a bit quickly, but I go into this in much detail in my book, because I talked about this previously at Paradigm Shift, and yeah, people are like, yeah, get to the UFOs, and come on, buddy. When's the ascension, diamond body, and manifest all that money and stuff? But this year, I've seen it so many times. People are like, why don't these people get it? Now, it's dominant on the sacral chakra. And this is what we call in yoga, Svadhisthana chakra. And basically, what we need to understand is intelligence does not equal consciousness. And it means that people can have a lot of intelligence. I went to uni for 6 years. There were people way more intelligent than me, way better academically, way better careerists, way better at doing like climbing the corporate ladder. But consciousness is something completely different. And that's why people are able to see through the mirage, see through the subterfuge, is because consciousness is what determines how you experience reality. It's not about rote learning information. It's not about this ability to be successful academically or in a career. Consciousness is something else. And this chakra is where humanity is dominant on, and it means it's the collective mind, the collective consciousness. We can refer to it as the hive mind. And people at this level of consciousness, they simply go with the flow. They basically go with the group consensus, the collective census. Now, if you look at even the animal in this symbol, this is the symbol for this chakra, it's a mythical animal called a makara, which is like a crocodile, right? Crocodile's a bit of a sly, sneaky animal, right? If you put a crocodile even this far underwater, you can't even see it at the surface, right? Yeah? They don't even show any signs that the water's moving through above them. And the hive mind means that the people at this level of consciousness, they believe that they're forming their own opinions about various viewpoints, various issues and so on. But they're actually not. They're being indoctrinated. They're being a belief system's being inserted into their consciousness. And the more that you are attached to this collective hive mind, the more you aren't able to critically think for yourself. And we are all connected at the hive mind, actually, to a degree. But the more we go through the consciousness up through these energy centres, the more we actually start to be able to perceive reality for ourselves. It's consciousness that is something that's different to intelligence. So, this famous quote from Plato, "Those who are able to see beyond the shadows of their culture will never be understood, let alone believed by the masses." And again, this idea of frequency and vibration, which is important to think of, because this split between the 3D and 5D, it's starting to occur now, and 2020 has been a litmus test. It's the first of this becoming more tangible, more concrete, more evident. It's basically a 7-year cycle from the end of the Mayan calendar in 21st of December 2012, coming to a conclusion 7 years later, and now we're seeing the fruits of that. And it will become more intense. There's nothing that anyone can do about it. It's the cosmic game, it's the cosmic plan. And that's why the resonances that we carry in our own aura, in our own energetic frequency, in our own signature through the chakras, determine 100% what we can perceive and what we can't perceive. Now, you can never condemn someone for having a consciousness in the lower chakras, because that's who they are. That's where they are on their soul journey. But this process that we're going through in the Great Awakening, it's an acceleration of evolution. And some of us are getting on the train for this ride, and some of us aren't. And there's nothing, it's an individual journey, it's an individual choice. It's not right or wrong or good or bad, it's just a choice at the soul level. And this is why the quickening is occurring now, because these events are accelerating. And it's very much written in the ancient Indian texts that at the end of the Yuga, everything accelerates. So the darkness accelerates in terms of the events, but so does the light, and also the opportunity for evolution accelerates. So this decade, don't throw it away on the internet, you know. Take care of yourself, take care of your mental health. Do what makes you feel good. Do what gives you joy, that makes you inspired, that gives you this lightness, this elevated frequency, because this is what is the soul calling. This is what the journey of awakening is that we're all going through. And an important part of this is the dislocation with time and space, that we need to embody these frequencies. I'll just explain this quickly before I finish. One of the key aspects of the awakening that we're trying to project externally in many ways, and many of the assumptions of the New Age about the frequency and the process, a lot of it is, to be honest, it's not actually accurate. It may be further and further along, but this displacement in space and time is really one of the key beginnings of it. The things with the lower level, what I call the lower level of the awakening, understanding the global power structure, understanding the corruption, the global plan of the globalists and everything, that's actually not that important in the bigger picture. This wave of awakening that we're going to see, and again, there'll be another one next year and it'll be bigger. So don't write people off who you know think you're a crackpot and all the rest of it, because a lot of them are going to come good, actually. You'll be surprised. And I tell you what, I'm totally surprised as well this year, people who you know. It doesn't seem to make any difference what occupation they have, you know, all these sort of things you expect will determine consciousness. It's very individual, it's very unique. But this space-time displacement is what's occurring through this throat chakra, through this Vishuddha chakra, which means purity in Sanskrit. And basically, if you don't hear, or we don't see each other again, you don't get to hear this again, you'll start to notice, I believe in the years to come, that there will be a bifurcation process where you're going to gradually start to split away from your physical body in what I'm terming at the moment a conscious astral projection. And this basically means that when you're in a state of stillness, like presence, that there will start to be a separation. And this is regulated through Vishuddha chakra throat, and it's related to all these things of this chakra, including speech. And, you know, I need to clean up my act a little bit with a lot of the language I use sometimes, or a lot. And yes, especially in 2020. and this is the expansion and separation and a complete freezing of the mind, which in yogic terms we'd call the beginning of samadhi, which is cosmic consciousness, which is a complete freezing of the mind. And I'm not talking about a calm mind or a peaceful mind. The mind is completely frozen, and it will start to occur in just short moments, particularly when you've just woken up, if you've had a snooze or something like that, or meditation, of course, yoga, tai chi, qigong, all these things. But what it means is that this process is starting to crystallize for you, and it can come in waves. The most powerful that has been so far was in 2016, actually, but this year it's starting to come back again. But it's very subtle, it's very short, and it will catch you by surprise. And my best piece of advice I can give to you with this is that don't try to do anything with it. Don't try to go, you know, oh, get the whole spiritual ego, wow, I'm so evolved, you know, it's starting to happen to me. Don't do anything, or, you know, or try to text someone. Don't. Just stay there with it. It might even last for 2-3 seconds. But then start to integrate it, start to embody it. And of course, through presence, this is the most important. It's not enough for us in this decade to just awaken. We must come together, because there is a clear and present danger that is occurring now on this planet in regard to our rights, our freedoms, our liberties. You guys already know all about this, but we have to come together as one, you know, as one people. And more than ever, it's time to hold the light and to amplify the light in our being, because it's quite a journey we've got ahead of us. And of course, there's the whole other half of the equation is our symbiotic relationship with Mother Earth, which a lot of us overlook a lot of the time, and that's really going to come into play, because Earth has got her own journey of awakening as well. That Mother Earth is going to go through her own internal or external shift, and she's going to be full of surprises for us as to where that's going to go. The message I'm getting intuitively this year, it started a few months ago, and I guess this is probably the most important thing I want to share today, is that everything is going to the cosmic plan, so trust that. And to hold the vision, trust the process. I know that's just a slogan, it's easy to say with all the mayhem going on in this world, but really, everything is going to the cosmic plan and everything will unfold as it should. So hold the vision, trust the process, and I'm having a workshop on Monday. If anyone wants to come, join me with that one Monday afternoon at Vibe Hotel. The details on the website, or come and ask me. And of course, we live in epic times. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you.